Hello there. This is Dr. Christy Taylor, and I actually wanted to do a quick 2 or 3 minute reflection on what I really learned from this process. I look very informal here, but I just wanted to do a reflection because I think that it all comes down to some of the things that we learned in the modules about when to choose excellence over equity. So when I initially started this process, the research that I was doing was really geared towards how do I help us to navigate how we actually mentor our minority faculty members through the continuing contract process. And so I looked at a lot of different pieces of research. I incorporated some, you'll see in the PowerPoint presentation, there's information in there like change management, a lot of the stuff that we learned in modules 4 and 8, and just kind of did a lot of self reflecting. And I also looked at, how the college is currently progressing in terms of aligning ourselves with state equity and excellence standards for recruiting minority um, faculty members. And we're on par. We're not necessarily there yet, but I think that the first step was really to just to identify, hey, there's a need. And I think that we had identified that there's a need to really focus on recruitment long before we even identified the gaps in, hey, our minority faculty members are not necessarily reaching that goal. They're not reaching that goal or standard because we really just highlighted that in November 2019. What really has concerned me though is that a lot of effort went into revising our faculty continuing contract process, and then the administration rushed to implement it. And even as an associate dean, I was really unclear about how do I guide my faculty members along with this process. It's a really good process, and I venture to say because I was part of the faculty member group as I outlined in the project who was credentialed who was given continuing contract under the old process, and then we implemented a new process that was rushed, and that process didn't work. So within the last 5 years, this is going to be our second process that we have implemented to try to revise our faculty continuing contract process. Now, it was great because it was led by other faculty members. So there's no problem that I see with the new continuing faculty contract model itself. There's no problems that I see based on the research with the model that the CTLE is using. And the college has identified, again, some gap areas and is working on it. But the biggest problem I see, which is very scary to me, is the rush to implement this process without really training the administrators. And I remember sitting in the meeting when we identified, hey, do we have this gap for uh, with retention and recruitment, as well as supporting our minority faculty members to the completion of the continuing contract process. And there just seems to be a big gap in training the administrators. Like, we put in all of the resources there for the faculty members, but when we talk about using adaptive leadership and going through a proper change management process, well, a lot of the research shows that we need to engage faculty, et cetera, et cetera. And that process happens with the CTLE and the redesigning of the model, but it did not happen with the implementation because the middle level leadership, me as an associate dean and my teammates, we were not engaged in that process. I could not effectively advise faculty members on, hey, this is how this is going to work. So faculty members was receiving information from the CTLE, which is good, but it wasn't good because it demonstrated a disconnect in the fact that we as the administrators were supposed to be supporting these CTLE efforts. And so the information was getting misconstrued. You had faculty members at the 2 to 4 year mark who were already engaged in the old process, that intermittent process that had been implemented, who were trying to get their stuff ready to be evaluated for the board, and the board has been rejecting a high number of people. So I will venture to say that this new process, if it was implemented effectively, it will work well. So that is of a great concern to me. It's still something I want to work with them to support addressing. And one way to do that is really to work with the CTLE to not only to develop some training for faculty members, but I think the CTLE and that faculty developer, since they engage with the faculty hand on, would be really great in conjunction with HR with developing some type of training to support middle managers or associate deans through the process of mentoring faculty members in a culturally competent way, because that gap still exists. And also, from a top-down leadership perspective, the leadership team, that although they might be supportive of faculty in terms of allowing them to be creative, when it comes to implementing processes at our institution, is very top-down. And so that's also very scary. So if you try to develop a model for mentoring minority faculty members, but you still haven't addressed the disparities with faculty members as a whole, I mean, even based on the stakeholders map, there's still gonna be some gaps. You're gonna start to experience those resistance to change, um, and people are not gonna want to support that. And you have to be very careful with a process like this, because you don't want to say, "Hey, we're targeting minority faculty members and we're seeking to develop them," and almost like an affirmative action model, but you still haven't addressed the disparities with the pay gap, and you still haven't addressed disparities with just what is the process going to be in general for how we mentor all faculty toward this process. Because once we do that, it's going to be much easier. I mean, there's no reason for me, if I was um, a full-time faculty member, non-minority, there would be no reason for me to buy into that if I don't feel like I'm not going to benefit from it. So even though there's the data that says as a whole, having the presence of minority faculty members is important for student engagement, we're at a point where faculty members are thinking about individual survival. I mean, and I can't even venture to say how this COVID thing is going to impact, because enrollment is already down. So it's almost like you got enrollment down, you have faculty members who are struggling to make load, and I'm not really sure that in the greater scheme of things, continuing contract or mentoring other minority faculty members is a priority for certain faculty members if you can't even make load yourself. So there's a lot of things that are coming into play. Also, I just want to kind of go back and mention, from a business standpoint, most of my project focused on the internal aspects of it, but from a business standpoint, it's really important, to make sure that not only are we hiring people who can engage our students, but we also want to make sure that we are getting the best qualified people. And, this is all still a work in progress for the college. And I think what this project really helped me to identify was, initially going into it, I thought that we could probably, just develop a program targeting and mentoring. But the more I looked at it, the more I saw really what we need to do is target our administrators and mentor them. Because we can be behind the scenes as an administrator. So now I'm back on the faculty side. We can be behind the scenes as an administrator and using those adaptive leadership techniques that we've learned to support all faculty members and send them in the right direction. But the biggest problem is that minority faculty members, and this was identified in meetings as well, don't always feel like they have somebody who can relate to. They're not going to always just reach out and ask for help. So you have to be able to relate to them and build trust with people so that they can feel comfortable engaging with you, and then you can make those referrals. And if you have a culturally competent administrative staff, then that will support your diversity initiatives for recruitment. But you can have targeted diversity initiatives for recruitment, and then when you bring that person in, you can take all faculty members through a process of training and mentorship with engaged members from the CTLE, engaged supervisors, i.e. associate deans, and also engaged assigned faculty mentors that will mentor all your faculty members, because each person will be getting exactly what they need. So this really taught me that two things. One, we need to focus on the process, the foundational excellence. Two, we need to make sure that we're training up our administrative team to, use the right approaches to mentoring them. And then, of course, the final thing was, I should have said three, because the final thing was that we are headed in the right direction, because we're beginning to retarget recruitment, but until we fix the underlying issue, again, the systemic issue with the salaries, it's going to continue to be a problem. So overall, I really enjoyed doing this project and the reflection, and I look forward to, the feedback.